But you can move that down.
Well, thanks for having me back. Having, of course, not got rid of me last time, I went way over time, and nobody did the proverbial this. And you're also attentive, unlike my students at Brock, who had been slamming files and noisily going out of the lecture hall. You sat very attentively, and thanks to you. But this time, I promise I will be over in good time, so there'll be time for questions. The rail bit, yes, goes back a long way. As you know, parents in Britain got rid of their kids for whole days at a time by sending them out to be train spotters.
Just going to carry on.
At least the male variety were sent that way. Women never train spotted. I don't know why, but they were interest females, but they played at home with their dolls, presumably. But we all went out as train spotters. And if you look at the number of geographers, as I went through geography faculties who were train spotters, the connection is, of course, travel. The connection is looking at the landscapes and so on that trains go through. So the ride from Vancouver to Toronto today, which takes, by the way, from Tuesday, I got on the train on Tuesday evening and we got to Toronto at Saturday lunchtime. So you're in for a long holiday. Don't think it's an easy journey. But you see, of course, across Canada, some fantastic landscapes. You spend hours and hours going through one landscape, really. If you look at the Canadian Shield from basically Orillia through to the Lake of the Woods near on the way to Winnipeg. And then, of course, the Canadian Prairie from therein all the way to the foothills of the Rockies near Calgary. So, or at Jasper, I guess. So you're looking at very continuous landscapes in Canada. Then when you get to Alberta and British Columbia, you're looking at a series of north-south, roughly north-south mountain ranges from the front hills of the Rockies through to the coastal ranges in Vancouver. And then, of course, you go to the island and yet another coastal range going through Vancouver Island. So you have, a very varied landscape, mountainous landscape, of course, in very small part of Canada. And then, say, from Prairie and Canadian Shield all the way virtually to the St. Lawrence Basin in Toronto. So the journey is something worth taking, and we'll talk about the promotion of the railway a little later. So yes, I've been had a long interest in railways. And when I first came to this country, I came over on a Canadian Pacific boat from Liverpool to Quebec City. I wouldn't recommend it. Of course, as you know, there's no liners crossing the Atlantic anymore, just cruise ships. But it was the most boring experience imaginable, spending a week at sea from the last of the land, of course, of the west coast of Scotland, because the boat goes from Liverpool to Greenock near Glasgow. And then until you get to just coming down the St. Lawrence before Quebec City, it is a very tedious Atlantic journey. And in August, when I was traveling, by the way, couldn't sit out on deck. It was so cold. And they would come around at 11 o'clock. For those hardy people sitting on deck, they'd come around with soup to keep you going until lunch. I wouldn't recommend that journey at all. But anyway, the rail journey from Quebec City, but again via CP to Montreal was great.
Your papers, it's a touch screen, so the papers are touching the screen and advancing the slides.
If you go back to the original
slide. Yeah. Somehow managed to zoom the whole thing too. There we go. Still want that one? No papers touching the screen. Okay. Yes.
I wish I had this kind of techie help when I was lecturing, because things would invariably go wrong with the slide projector in the lecture hall. Anyway, I had the good fortune though of having a Canadian Pacific pass to go from Quebec City to Vancouver. And that was very rewarding. Unfortunately, we only got to Montreal, and then there was a national rail strike.
Welcome to Canada.
Yeah, welcome to Canada. There was a national rail strike in that August of 1966. And I had to go from Montreal to Ottawa by bus. And it gave me an opportunity, of course. There was an emergency sitting of Parliament, which was wonderful because there was Lester Pearson being a very, unbecoming kind of prime minister. He didn't really have any flair for the job, but he was a fantastic politician, as you all know, in many respects. And opposite him was John Diefenbaker. Well, I'd never seen quite a politician like that. I mean, he was the sort of joker in the pack. I sort of wondered where the heck he came from. He came from Prince Albert in Saskatchewan, and I knew nothing about Saskatchewan, of course, at that time. And then opposite him was Tommy Douglas, who was another kind of firebrand of a different kind. So I was really entertained in Parliament, in the public gallery, on my way through Ottawa. The trains weren't running, by the way, and had to go then to Toronto by bus and stayed with friends. And the National Rail strike wasn't letting up, so I had then to fly to Vancouver, and that was another kind of experience in itself, which we were going to. So here I am in Vancouver, and so my first opportunity of going across Canada by rail failed. The second opportunity was when I was at Brock and I had to go back to Vancouver to defend my PhD in whatever it was, 1974. And I was about to go back by train. I thought, what a wonderful opportunity. It's vacation time and I can go by train. And guess what? There was an air traffic controllers strike. And the trains were so packed with people, trying to get across the country that I had to then make sure I was flying again. And I booked a plane from Toronto to Vancouver, but also from Buffalo through Chicago to Seattle, just because the airlines were bursting at the seams in the States, because people weren't traveling, perhaps weren't going to travel in Canada. So the second the second transcontinental failed as well. The opportunity came in 2011. I was going to a conference in Seattle, and I thought, I'll come back from Seattle by train. So I flew to friends to Victoria by ferry, visited friends, came to Vancouver, and here is the rail journey you're going to see in just a minute. Let's talk about the transcontinental. As you may know, of course, from Canadian history, unfortunately, you don't get Canadian history at school in Britain. You don't get Canadian geography. I knew virtually nothing about this country before I came here, and certainly didn't know much about these rail connections. The first, as you know, the first transcontinental was the completion of bits and pieces of rail line, including, for example, the Rogers Pass, which had to be tunneled. The completion was 1883 to Port Moody, at the end of Burrard Inlet, and then the extension from Port Moody into Vancouver, into the terminal you see at the moment in downtown Vancouver. The second transcontinental was a series of private lines, the first one reaching Vancouver in 1914, which then became Canadian National in the 1920s. The private companies failed, the government stepped in, and the result was a government-owned Canadian National Railway, taking, of course, very different routes, as you'll see in just a moment. Those two rail companies both ran transcontinental trains, and both the lines at one stage had two daily services on them. By the time Via Rail came in, there was only one service on each line each day. The railway companies, of course, wanted to get out of the rail business, passenger rail business, as you well know. And of course, Via Rail, the federal government-owned arm of government, stepped in and formed Via Rail for passenger rail transport in Canada at that time. And virtually all the trains in the country at that time were taken over by the government. There were some independent ones, for example, from Sault Ste. Marie up to, I'm trying to think of the name of the valley now, that everybody takes the Agua Canyon, yes. Agua Canyon is not Via Rail. So there are 1 or 2 lines in the country that are not. Otherwise, yes, Via Rail took over in 1977. The next step, of course, well, let's say they took over the passenger rail service. Let's talk about the Trans-Canada. I'm talking about Trans-Canada by rail. There never was a complete Trans-Canada by rail. The line from Vancouver finishes either in Toronto or Montreal. There's from Montreal, of course, another part of Trans-Canada, if you like. CN and CP go to Halifax. The CN, of course, goes via Quebec and New Brunswick to get to Halifax. The CP line goes straight out of Montreal through the eastern townships, crosses over that part of Maine, and passengers were sort of frozen from getting out of the train in the United States. It's still Canadian. And then it re-entered Canada, of course, in New Brunswick. That line is long gone, even before the end of Via Rail, before the end of CP rail. But there's instead 2 Trans-Canadas that finished in Montreal. In the United States, when they talk about transcontinental in the United States, again, there was no such thing. There's an eastern part and a western part. The western part, the one that exists today, of course, and is well worth visiting, starts in Chicago. So Chicago was always the eastern end, if you like, of the transcontinental in the United States. And different rail companies, many rail companies, of course, and then from Chicago, you then would go to New York via the New York Central or the Pennsylvania Railroad. Those 2 were the major lines that went from Chicago to New York. The only real transcontinental which doesn't exist today, at least they're trying to reform it, I believe, is from Los Angeles to New Orleans through to Jacksonville, Florida. Now, the part that goes to Florida from New Orleans is not part of a continuous line from Los Angeles, and I don't know that there's always a line from New Orleans to Jacksonville in Florida, but you could try it on for size. Amtrak, of course, is again the public line that took over from all the private companies in the United States. So there never was a transcontinental. 1990, as you can see, was Via Rail economizing. The Tory government at the time was accused, of course, of favoring Tory constituencies where the lines went, i.e. the southern route, the old CP route from Vancouver to Calgary, Regina to Winnipeg. That was cut in 1990 in favor of the northern route, the CN route, from Vancouver to Jasper, Edmonton, Saskatoon to Winnipeg. So the one was discontinued, and it was said that there were more ardent Tory MPs pushing the envelope to the minister and to the premier, who was Mulroney at the time, to keep that route open. It's a little unfair because the route was probably kept open because of the connection from Jasper to Prince George to Prince Rupert. That line still exists today, of course, and it was an important connection for many communities in northern British Columbia and northern Alberta. There wasn't the same, shall we say, push from southern communities on the old CP route. Also, the direct service on the transcontinental from Caprel or Sudbury through to Ottawa and Montreal was discontinued. You can go to Montreal and Ottawa, but you have to change in Toronto. Well, who wants to go 2 sides around a triangle to get to Montreal when you could fly more easily? The other thing that happened in 1990 was that the daily service on the transcontinental was reduced to 3 times a week. So if you travel, be careful which days you want to travel on because it doesn't always go. It just so happens in 1990 that the Rocky Mountaineer started its tourist services, and they are well worthwhile going on. Of course, many of you have been on them. And it just so happened, of course, they chose the southern route, which was discontinued by Vera Air, at least as far as Banff. You can't go all the way to Calgary on the Rocky Mountaineer, but it finishes well, the one I was on finished in Lake Louise. It didn't even go to Banff, but so don't quote me on how far east you can go. Just look at the timetable because it's subject to change. First of all, in my demonstration of the pictures, if you like, of what you're going to see on this journey, Vancouver and the Coast Mountains, of course, is where you start the journey. A very interesting part of the journey is the Fraser Valley, but particularly the Fraser Gorge and the Thompson River to Kamloops. And then you're through into a very dry interior British Columbia. And then, of course, you go up the North Thompson to Jasper, or you can go the South Thompson through the various ranges of mountains to Lake Louise and Banff. So this is the first part of my journey. And if you do this trip, if you start in Vancouver, you see a different set of mountains than if you do the journey from Toronto. If you start from Vancouver, our train left at 8 at night, and as a result, of course, we didn't see the Fraser Valley or the Fraser Gorge. We woke up in the Thompson Valley just before Kamloops. So if you do it the other way, we saw the Rockies. If you do it the other way, you don't see the Rockies, but you see all of the Fraser Gorge and the Fraser Valley and the coast mountains, if you like. So be careful as to which way round you do the journey, Vancouver to Toronto or vice versa, in order to get the kinds of scenery you'd like to experience. So careful with the timetable when or the journey. I wouldn't recommend you go by train in both directions. That's a little bit of a stretch and also a major financial hardship. I would fly in one direction. Vancouver, of course, is a marvelous city, and spend time in Vancouver at the end or the start of your journey. I lived there for 3 years and didn't regret one moment of it, at least not between June and September. If you go between October and April or May, you'll have rain, and it really rains. And this scene taken from the top of the highest subdivisions in West Vancouver, you will be in cloud at this level for much of the year even. So be careful as to when you travel in terms of the season. Unfortunately, of course, if you travel in the summer, it's more crowded and the prices are higher. If you go at the time of year I went, which was I traveled in April from Vancouver, the prices are more reasonable. This is the view, of course, over Greater Vancouver from the upper subdivisions, if you like, of Western and North Vancouver. You're looking over, of course, Stanley Park. On the left, you can see the Lionsgate Bridge connecting the park to the North Shore. And in the distance, of course, beyond the park, you can see downtown Vancouver. And you're looking across the whole stretch of the Fraser Valley. Remember what you're seeing this is Broad Inlet. You haven't got to the Fraser River yet. That's south of Vancouver. And this is the famous Lionsgate Bridge built in 1938 by the Guinness family. This connects, of course, Stanley Park and downtown Vancouver with the North Shore. And you're looking at Grouse Mountain, which is one of the ski resorts. There's 3 ski resorts on the North Shore: Seymour, Grouse, and Cypress. Cypress was closed when I lived there because there was a fire. It destroyed the ski facilities, and it didn't reopen until much, much later. But Grouse and Seymour are open both of them open for night skiing. And this is where you learn to ski at night when you're a student. So this is the Lionsgate Bridge. As you can see, only 3 lanes, and of course a bottleneck because 2 lanes work one way and one the other way. And it varies according to the rush hour, of course, from the North Shore to downtown. Oh, sorry, one way. This is an old quarry at Canby and 33rd called Queen Elizabeth Park now. And you're looking over the downtown, of course, to the North Shore. And in the very center of the picture, you can see the subdivisions where the posh folk live. You can see these subdivisions climbing higher and higher up the mountain. I think they've actually now got to the highest they can be and be, plowed out by road, snowplow rather, on their roads in winter. I think they've now controlled how far up the mountain they can go. This is the CP terminal in downtown Vancouver. This was built, of course, not in 1885. I'm not quite sure the date of this. It strikes me as 1920s or 30s, but I'm not too sure of the date of this neoclassical building, beautiful, beautiful building against the waterfront in Vancouver. This is the concourse, the main waiting room, if you like, inside the station. Unfortunately, of course, the station doesn't have any mainline trains anymore. Via Rail does not come here. This is what happens. This is their version of Go train. It's called the something Express. I can't quite read it properly, but West Coast Express. It's hardly an express. It's like Go train. It sort of lumbers from one station to the next, and it goes as far as Mission City, which is about 50 miles out down the Fraser Valley. So it's a commuter service, strictly a commuter service by weekday. It's also the terminus of SkyTrain. As you can see, the SkyTrain is the last train in the background there, which you take, of course, from the airport into the center of the city. So it's hardly the famous CP depot that it used to be in the good old days. This is where Via Rail comes. This is the other station. This is the CN station in a very shady part of town. It's down Main Street, and you would look twice when you go down Main Street. You're not going to be, kidnapped or, struck over the head. It's that kind of area of town. It's very dodgy. But anyway, this is where CN is. And of course, the United States Amtrak comes into this station as well. There is a connection from here to Seattle. Not quite as, this is the sort of this is where the train, this is the Via Rail terminus, if you like, and not exactly CP standard. Going down the Fraser Valley is an experience, of course, that's well worth it, because this is a huge agricultural area. There's not much agriculture in British Columbia, and this is a major part of it in terms of fruit and vegetables, for example, some corn and grain, but it's a valley that narrows, of course, from the various arms of the Fraser River at the delta, narrows, of course, until you go into the Fraser Gorge, which you'll see in just a moment. That's the. I thought I had a slide in here. I'm sorry, I had another slide. Obviously, in my rush, I didn't quite transfer it properly. This is looking at the north side of the Fraser Valley. If you look at the south side of the Fraser Valley, you're into the next mountain range that comes along, of course, which has Mount Baker. And Mount Baker at 11,000 plus feet is snow-capped all year, and is a major ski resort as well. But this overshadows the Fraser Valley on a good day in Vancouver. If you live in the western suburbs of Vancouver, up the hill towards the UBC campus, you can see Mount Baker simmering above the clouds sometimes, snow-capped, virtually 80 to 90 miles from Vancouver. But I thought I had that slide, the south side of the Fraser Valley. Somehow it got missed. This is the Fraser Gorge. This is taken from the Trans-Canada Highway that used to go through the valley. There's now a new Trans-Canada Highway, but this is taken from the highway, and you can see, of course, the CP line and the CN line on either side of the valley. And CP came first, and it switched sides. So when it did so, the later CN, of course, had to go on the other side. So you have two bridges higher up the gorge, crisscrossing near one another to take the line onto the other side. Unfortunately, I couldn't find my picture of the bridges, but it doesn't matter. The gorge, of course, is at times you know, a little wider than other times, but essentially it is this rugged kind of appearance throughout. There's a train on the other side. We're on the west side, I guess, and that's on the east side. The thing about traveling by train in Canada is that they don't keep to a timetable very well. And we left at 8 o'clock in the evening, and we got down the Fraser Valley, not too far, and we stopped. And we stopped for 6 hours. That's not unusual in winter weather. Sometimes the train, my wife once went on a train from Saskatoon to Toronto, and somewhere along the stretch, it was 24 hours late. Just to give you some idea of what travel is like. Now that was winter weather. In this case, it was a freight train ahead that failed, and it's only a single line, so we had nowhere to go but sit behind it until it was fixed. And in fact, our engineer went and helped the freight train engineer fix it so that we could move forward. So we were 6 hours late all the way along the line. What this meant was that we did go through the Fraser Gorge by night, but we breakfast, instead of being in Kamloops, it was in the Thompson Valley just after Lytton. So we had the benefit. So these pictures actually were not taken by me on this train trip. They were taken on the Rocky Mountaineer. This is Hell's Gate. This is where the gradient of the valley changes considerably. And you can see the rapids through Hell's Gate. And as a result of that, this is salmon spawning. And they have to have ladders at this point for the fish to jump from level to level, so that they can go upriver to breed. And so this is a spot that tourists obviously congregate around in order to see the fish jumping. I've never been that enthused by it. I've been up and down this gorge many times, but I never went to Hell's Gate to see this. This is taken again from the train. It widens, as you can see, and you can see levels of the gorge where the road, of course, was put through more easily than the train. At Lytton was the town that was destroyed by fire virtually the other year. And when we went through Lytton on the Rocky Mountaineer, we were asked not to take photos, to respect the locals who were burned out, and not to take photos. As you turn from the Fraser Gorge, the Fraser River, into the Thompson River at Lytton, you literally come down at every turn of the valley. You come down by another few inches of rainfall. So you go from this lush vegetation of the gorge into this very seedy looking picture. The railway, again, one on one side, one on the other side of the river. And you're going down from many tens of inches of rain to literally 10, 9, 7, 8, and so on inches of rain per year. When you, it's called the rain shadow. As you know, the majority of the winds come from the southwest or west, certainly not from the east. So once you get through this mountain range, the rainfall has dropped on the slopes earlier, and then suddenly you're into a rain shadow area where you go down to, say, literally 5 to 10 inches of rain per year. And a lot of that, as you well imagine, comes in snow. This is looking at this is via rail. We're now, as a result of being 6 hours held up in the Fraser Valley, we are now in daylight where we wouldn't have been had the train been on time. So we're now in the Thompson River, and you're looking from the posh end of the train where I was traveling, and we'll look at the train in a moment. You're looking along to the observation car in the general economy section of the train. And just look ahead of that, there's 2 locomotives and 3 carriages, 3 coaches, one of which is obviously a baggage car. So there's only 2 coaches ahead. We'll look at the train a little later in the journey, and you'll see how many more cars have been put on the front of the train. But this is the minimum size that it was. There's a freight train passing on the other side of the valley, as you can see. Here's how it widens out just before Kamloops. This is I digress here. This is a picture taken from the road when I was a student out there. This is how dry it gets, and the vegetation, of course, is around farms, artificial or irrigated vegetation, as you can see. This is the town of Ashcroft, and Ashcroft is a CP depot. The CN line is on the north side, the CP line is on the south side. Again, taken from the road by me earlier. The Thompson Valley, before you get to heavily eroded at some point in millions of years ago, and there's some fantastic landforms. In some ways, it pays to do this journey by road, so you can stop where you want, rather than be on a train and be frustrated because your picture is not quite what you wanted it to be. So that there is, if you can end your journey in Calgary or Banff and then go by road to Vancouver, in many ways, it's more rewarding than being on a train. You have to be a real train lover to stay on the train versus being on the road. And I've done this journey, obviously living in Vancouver, I've done this journey to Banff many, many times. And as I say, some of this vegetation that you can see is so rewarding. Here you have gully erosion, and then you can see a band of hard rock and a band of soft rock and so on. It's very, very rewarding. This is approaching Kamloops, and one thing that gets to me, of course, when you look at Canadian cities and towns, is that urban sprawl is alive and well. These people, of course, in these subdivisions climbing up the mountainsides, they all have, full urban services. They have running water and sewers and so on. Imagine the cost of providing, the utility lines up a mountain like this. And you see it all over, of course, in poorly planned communities, where land is cheap, and you can make sure you're provided with services, and you can clamber up the mountainside. And Kamloops, is a shining example of poor planning in Canada. After Kamloops, you're getting increasingly now into a rainforest area, temperate rainforest area. So going up the North Thompson towards Jasper, you're experiencing, as I say, forests and the forest industry coming back to the interior of British Columbia. You may well imagine why I took this. Well, because it's a freight train coming in the other direction. Again, passenger rail service in Canada, especially on the transcontinental, if you meet a freight train, the freight train has priority. So you get hauled off into a siding, and the freight train, in this case CN, passes by. And this happens frequently because there is a heavy freight traffic across Canada. Coming into the last of the series of mountains, the true Rockies, as people call it. Even in April, of course, you're still experiencing winter snow. So it's a very rewarding time of the year to cross Canada as opposed to going in August. So think April, and also fares are lower. This is Mount Robson, I believe, which is one of the tallest mountains in the Canadian Rockies. Jasper, of course, as you know, a third of the town burned down recently. Jasper itself, of course, is not exactly, paradise. The fact of the matter is, when you travel by train, of course, you land up at railroad stations in not very nice areas of town most of the time. There are freight yards around them, and you have very short stops. The maximum stop, I believe, is 1 hour or 1.5. I got my crib sheet here. I think 1.5 hours at Jasper is the maximum stop on Via Rail. All the other major cities and towns you get anywhere from 20 minutes to 3/4 of an hour. So you can't go anywhere. That's the other thing. You're trapped on a train. They let you out of the train to walk along the track, but along the platform, but you can't go anywhere. You have stretching your legs, exercise and all of that is difficult. VRL doesn't have a gym on the train or anything like that. You have to get out where you can at the stations. And after Kamloops, the next station is Jasper. So take your opportunity, whatever time of day it is, and sometimes you're in the middle of the night, so you don't want to exercise. But it is awkward. Now, if you stop at Jasper, and another thing I didn't do, but you can do, of course, is to get off the train and stay somewhere, and then 3 days later, it's only 3 times a week, so you have to stay a night or two and pick up the next train. That's a thing you can do, which is very rewarding. A lot of people do that, of course, with respect to Jasper and get the later train from Jasper east. But when you get to Jasper, of course, all the interesting things are out of town. So you'd have bus connections from hotels to get to the various lakes and mountain views and so on. They're not actually in Jasper itself. Jasper, I don't think is architecturally or a stunning place. As you know, some of the town burned down, a lot of the town burned down, and there's, of course, question. You see it in the papers. A lot of political and economic political debate and economic hardship as a result of that terrible forest fire that swept through town 2 years ago, was it? I can't remember the exact date, but anyway, this is Jasper from the train. The locomotives, of course, that pull it. This is the Rocky Mountaineer. We're now on the southern stretch from Kamloops. The Rocky Mountaineer does do both directions, both northern and southern lines, but we took the Rocky Mountaineer in 2022 to Banff from Vancouver. And just to show all the way along this line, and also the VRL line, of course, is the evidence of the forest products industry. And this is, of course, a cut. There's waiting for a train to come along that siding to take the wood off to the mill or pulp paper factory or wherever it's going to go. So a lot of evidence, of course, of one of Canada's vital industries. Same mountains, if you like, same mountain range, just further south between Kamloops and Lake Louise. Now, these pictures were taken in August, so this tells you the extent of even in summer weather, not too far from the rail line, you have, of course, could have been the makings of a glacier. I don't know whether it's still a glacier. It would have been, but as you know, through global warming, glaciers are retreating, so this might not be a glacier. Clear cutting, of course, evidence of much of the forest industry where they just attack a hillside and take all the trees down and wait for it to regrow. This is Lake Louise. If you go on the Rocky Mountaineer and you pay the price, there are two prices, gold and silver. You have to question whether it's worthwhile. Gold for a couple is $10,000. Which is 2 days on the train, hotel in Vancouver, Kamloops, Lake Louise, and Banff. All your meals, yes. And you can finish off at the Pallister Hotel, the OCP Hotel in downtown Calgary. It's a lot of money to pay for a train ride. The bar opens at 10 o'clock in the morning. Drinks are free. They ply you with booze, of course, to keep you from sheer boredom, probably. So it comes at a price. And the only difference between gold and silver is that gold, you sit upstairs and have your meals downstairs. In silver, you have your meals at your seat, like on an aircraft. Anyway, at Lake Louise, you do stay in the old CP Hotel. at Lake Louise. This is the view, of course, from the footpath in front of the hotel. And this was taken in 1964. No, sorry, let me get that right. 1967, sorry, Expo year. This is the same view in 2022. And unfortunately, you can't look at the difference in the snow cover because they've taken different times of the year. So you can't see retreating glaciers here, whereas in many parts of the world, your mountain view over 50 years or 60 years time difference, you'll see, of course, the difference in snow cover from the point of view of glaciers. You won't here because this is snowfall as opposed to a glacier. Here's the hotel where you get a lake view, you pay the price, and of course you get entertainment from the tourists. Now, of course, people, women especially, have to pose in front of the scenery. They're not interested in the scenery, they're interested in their pose. But this is Lake Louise. Here is the view of Banff town site taken from the top of the chairlift. And yes, you're looking at one of the most spectacular views in the world, in many people's opinion. And the Banff Jasper Highway, if you get the opportunity to rent a car and go up the Banff Jasper Highway, is again a very rewarding day trip. And you won't, if you've done it a number of times, you're still rewarded in the same way. I've done that highway 4 times, and I could do a 5th time. Yes, it wouldn't worry me. So this is the southern terminus, of course, of the Banff Jasper Highway. There's the Banff Springs Hotel, and if you go on the Rocky Mountaineer, you stay at the Banff Springs Hotel. There's the view of the town site from the government offices. I'm in front of the government offices, looking along Main Street to the mountain range beyond. I forget the name of the mountain now. Someone will remind me, I'm sure. And this is the view down the valley towards Camrose. And this is the front, or the other side of the mountain, rather, is the front range of the Rockies. And after that, you're out on the prairie. So what we're going to do now is to look at the prairies. And of course, this is the northern route through Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. And Winnipeg, the major city, of course, is the changing point between the staff who are on the train, who are exchanged from obviously the western staff and the eastern staff. There's a complete changeover of staff in Winnipeg. They don't, the engineer doesn't drive all the way. They have, periods of time when he's not working or she is not working, but the complete staff change is at Winnipeg on this train. After Winnipeg, of course, you again on the northern route, and you're going to be going, of course, very quickly through the Canadian Shield, this Precambrian rock formation that covers 35% of Canada. You'll be going through this all the way to almost Barrie, the same geological formation. This is the view, hour upon hour upon hour. It drives you to drink if you're a teetotaler. Yes, you see the farms. You see a farm in the distance. This was taken, say, in April. So they're not waving waving cornfields or wheat fields and so on. So it's best to travel in the summer in the sense of seeing farming on the prairies. This is not very good in April. A bit of excitement, of course, looking out of the train. And here comes the school bus. Oh, by the way, the train took until Western Saskatchewan to get back to its timetable. It was 6 hours late leaving the Fraser Valley, and we didn't make up time. We're on time by shortening sometimes the stops we didn't make up time and back on the timetable until Western Saskatchewan. Yes, there are still grain elevators on the prairies. Some of the old painted ones. In fact, I didn't see one of the old painted ones at all on our day through the prairies. We saw modern elevators like this one, but they were fairly frequent. And yes, you're excited to come through a small town. Here is a farm. Oh my goodness! And evidence that it might be a Ukrainian farm of a Ukrainian family, of course, is the little turret above the house, which is not something we have on our houses. At least I don't have one on my house. But when you see this, it could be a Ukrainian community on the prairies. That is, a theory. I couldn't test it. Yet another grain elevator, somewhere in Saskatchewan. Things got boring enough, of course, on the prairies that I took some pictures of the train itself. This is of course, the bar car, the observation car, bar car at the end of the train. And if you go for accommodation, the minimal accommodation, of course, is an upper and lower bunk on either side of a corridor down the middle of the train. That is the basic accommodation. I don't really recommend it. I mean, you're sleeping alongside someone you don't know. You're relatively safe, I assume. We don't hear of, assaults and so on the train, but it is open. You have a curtain, if you like, on the lower, both the upper and the lower bunk. That is the basic way of traveling. And had I taken the train, of course, in 1966 across Canada, me on my rather sad scholarship, that's where I would been sleeping. On this occasion, I had a roomette. A roomette, the base roomette is single accommodation in which you have a toilet and a wash basin in your roomette. At night, go to the toilet early because your bed comes down over the toilet. So, if you have to get up in the night, I'm not quite sure what you would do. I'm fortunate I don't have to get up in the night.
Do the windows open?
No. And also this roomette, the base roomette, doesn't have a shower. There is a communal shower down the corridor. So yes, you're not without a shower, but you do have to use that communal one. The two-room roomette, and I don't know, because I've not traveled by via rail that way, but certainly on the Amtrak train that we took from Chicago to San Francisco in 2022, the roomette on an Amtrak train does have all three bathroom facilities. So you're safe on Amtrak. This is the dining car. Honestly, 3 full meals a day and no exercise is fatal. The food is wonderful. I mean, you can't fault the food. A full cooked breakfast, and if your partner doesn't eat the breakfast, well, you get it as well. And the staff are very attentive, but 3 full meals a day, you learn very quickly that you don't need lunch. And so you go to the restaurant car, but you can avoid the meal and just have coffee or, well, of course, there's plenty of booze, so you can have that. If you're traveling single, as I was, my wife refused to travel by train because she spent much of her life traveling. Her father worked for CN and they lived in Moose Jaw, Winnipeg, Montreal, back to Moose Jaw, back to Winnipeg. So she spent a lot of her life traveling by train across Canada. And then when she was in university, of course, in New Brunswick, again, train across Canada. And so she refuses to travel by train. And it was a hard job getting her to go on Amtrak from Chicago to San Francisco, but she did relent. So I was on my own. Well, you're not on your own because it's such a social whirl in this accommodation. The bar car is always full of people. The restaurant car is full of people at meal times. And as a single person, I was put on another table. I put on a table with 3 or 2 other people, and there were always different people every meal. So you got to chat. And on this train, by the way, there are locals, but they're not in this part of the train. They're in the front part, the third or second class accommodations. In this part of the train, paying that kind of price, it's an international tourist haven, and you're seeing people from all parts of the world. I had dinner with people from Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, Japan. You know, I mean, this every meal was different because I was a single person. Now, if you're a couple, of course, you'll be put on a table with another couple, so you'll still meet lots of people. It's a lovely way, a very relaxing way of traveling for 4 nights and 5 parts of days. This is at mealtime. This is the bar car, nice flowers displayed, and there are the steps up to the observation deck. There you are in the observation car, looking frontwards, of course. There's me happily in the bar car. And entertainment in the bar car. This guitar player and string player came on at point A and got off at point B and entertained us. So it's a very relaxed, lovely environment. Now there is the second or third class accommodation on the down the front end of the train. As you can see, comfortable seats, but that's where you sit at night. Of course, there's no accommodations as we had at that part of the train. But many people, of course, do sleep in the train. They go all the way from Toronto to Vancouver, sitting up in a coach seat and sleeping in that seat by night. Not to be recommended, but I guess it's a little cheaper perhaps than flying. Winnipeg is the major stop that I referred to. Unfortunately, you get there in late evening and it was tippling down with rain. So I did exercise, got off out of the station, which is sort of very central. There's no CP and CN, sorry, there's no Union Station. The CP and CN both have stations there. And this is the old CN station, I believe. But it's pleasant. There's the interior of the station. There is the railway hotel. Is it called the Fort Garry Hotel? Something like that. Anyway, but as you can see, raining and very unpleasant. So a swift trip and back to the train. This is sunset on the prairie. It's, as you can see, very delightful. And the conditions allowed that scene to happen, of course. You'll notice, of course, it's in winter. So it's not my slide, it's somebody else's. But I thought I'd put it in because it's sort of what I would have experienced had the cloud not come down and the rain rained and so on. This is Sioux Lookout, as the sign on the water tower tells you. Sioux Lookout, we'd gone through the night in eastern Manitoba and northern Ontario, and we got to Sioux Lookout at breakfast on the Friday. That we left on Tuesday evening. This is the Friday morning in Sioux Lookout. Well, I can tell you that Saturday morning, just south of Orillia, or sorry, just north of Orillia, was the same. You go through a whole day and night through the Canadian Shield, and the scenery doesn't change. That could be a scene from anywhere in Northern Ontario. There is, of course, a forest fire had happened here. So you do see some different scenery. Yes, there's forest and different kinds of forest. And here is, as I say, a burned out section of a forest. And of course, many lakes. And that is a April scene on a Northern Ontario lake somewhere. Yes, another stop for a CN train passing. You know, any diversion is worth a camera shot. And the highlight, if you like, is meeting a Via Rail train coming the other way. Now, a friend of mine actually was on that train, and we agreed to wave. I knew the train he was on, but I didn't see him. He probably was in the bar car rather than the observation car. But you can see that we're the train that's traveling, because you see a railway worker standing on the track ahead of the other train. So there weren't two trains passing, you know, they were parked in a siding as we were passing. But that's the excitement for the morning, you know, it's somewhere in Northern Ontario. Yes, and yet another slide. You'll notice now it's a longer train. Yes, I heard John mention that. Instead of 3 cars ahead of us, yes, you can see the original 3 cars, and another 5 have been put on. I mean, you think, why the hell would they put more cars on a train like this? Well, in certain parts of the journey, certainly east of Winnipeg and north of Orillia, if you like, there are communities in Manitoba and Ontario which have no road connection. This train is their lifeline. And one reason I think why this northern line was chosen, not only to get to Prince Rupert, but also it's chosen because of the number of communities. And many of these communities are Aboriginal communities. This is their only lifeline. And they do have airstrips. Many of them have airstrips for small planes in summertime, or spring, summer, fall time, if you like. But they don't connect with any, you know, major destination. You may get from somewhere here to Sault Ste. Marie, for example, but you don't travel any long distance, and they're not big planes, and they're expensive, of course. So this is a lifeline for northern communities, and why that train 3 times a week only is used by the locals. Oh yes, yes, another train slide. Sorry about that. Yeah, this is Hornpain. Again, across northern Ontario, there are not many stops, and this is the where they let you out for, you know, 3/4 of an hour or so to exercise. And I say this is the metropolis of Hornpain, somewhere in northern Ontario. This is a railway station somewhere. And there is a gentleman sitting there with his bags and whatever, waiting for the train to stop. And funnily enough, the train really has to stop where he's eligible to get on, because ahead of the observation car is the dining car. I'm sure he would be welcomed into the dining car. There's a very class-oriented train that he would be down the front end of the train in one of those 7 cars that are 5 cars that's been added. But this is the kind of there's a community nearby. We didn't see anything in the way of communities, just the station at the rail track. So anyway, this is somewhere in northern Ontario. Now this one is really going up market, because it's got a sign saying CN Furland. If you've ever seen Furland, I've never been there, but some of you might have been. No station really. There's just a guy sitting on a bench. There's as much of a station as I could see, and a truck has dropped him off, obviously, from somewhere. But this is CN Furland. You only stop by request, by the way. There are 37 stops between Winnipeg and Toronto. And they're all, apart from obviously Hornpain and Sudbury and so on, they're all this kind of thing. And you request the train to stop, and it will, at 34 of these stops, sort of thing. Here, there's no sign of a station or a sign or anything, but the train stopped, and this is taken from the observation car. These people were getting out and being met by people and so on. Again, no sign of a community. I really couldn't see, other than a sort of post, I really couldn't see there was anything there. This is how, you know, incidental these stops are, but there's 37 of them in between, say, Winnipeg and Toronto. This is big time, of course. This is Wasago, which is near Orillia, and it's the last stop before Toronto. Just a digression. This is Northern Ontario. This is Northern Ontario in the good old times. This is a CP train, the Transcontinental CP train in 1972, coming through near Nipigon on the southern route that went through Thunder Bay, the old CP route. And this is, as I say, the CP Transcontinental in the summer of 1972. There's the back of the train. And here's the train arriving at Port Arthur. Thunder Bay, as you know, is made up of Fort William and Port Arthur. Big difference. Port Arthur was the CP towns. Fort William was the CN branch town, I believe. Anyway, this is the train arriving at Thunder Bay or Port Arthur station. And finally, we make our arrival at Union Station. This is the train, the end of the train, having arrived at early afternoon on the Saturday. We were 4 days after leaving Vancouver. And yes, this is the end of the journey, and this is the end of my little talk. So any questions? And yes, if you want to go on the Transcontinental, you have to book early, and it's well worth it. I know I've been cynical. You know, Brits are cynical. I'm being cynical about the traveling across the prairies and the Canadian Shield, but it is really worth it. The price has gone up. My ticket in April of 2011 was an old people's special for $1,300, all meals, all travel, all accommodation, $1,300 roughly. Is now, I think it's now roughly 3,000 or so. I don't know the exact price because I've never inquired, but save it up for a rainy day and do travel on the Transcontinental. It is well worth it. Yeah.
Well, not really a question.
I hope I got the right station.
When I was there were no roads in the road, and I lived there for 24 years, so I was there for quite a while. But I've also traveled from Vancouver to Toronto by train, and what you've done is pretty good. There's a lot of things that you can see along the way. I can tell you all sorts of stories about the river. My family was in Navy, and so I know the railway quite well.
Thank you.
As I'm walking over to Joe, I'm curious about when we travel by air. I think all of us know that there are air traffic controllers at airports. How do they do the control on the rail system? They're doing it by radio to the trains? It must be.
Well, it's all done by computer. I don't know whether the guy actually drives anymore. No, I don't know whether there's the system here by if you pass a red signal, it brakes for you. I assume that system's here. But certainly in Europe, you can't, hit anybody, really, unless it's a car on the tracks, for example. You can't, you're in danger from another train because, they're in radio or computer contact with headquarters. There are no signal boxes along the line anymore, controlling signals and points. That went out with the ARC in the 70s. But I'm sure it's all under control. Yes, we never felt we were in danger. No.
Just an anecdote for you. I was traveling on Via once from Toronto up to Winnipeg, and as you said, you get friendly with the people that are sitting around you. Me and Buddy were on the train. We're getting to a cart game some, and the train will let people off even if there is no stop there. So this train was slowed down enough for one of the guys to jump off. So. And then as it started speeding up, he yelled back, he says, "I forgot one of my bags." So I rushed over to get his bag and I managed to toss it off the train just before we disappeared into the bush. And I did was slow down a little bit for this bush.
You wouldn't get that service on GO train to Toronto.
Any other questions? No?
Thank you.
That was very, that was a very interesting presentation. Okay. Okay, that was a very interesting presentation, and I think that what went through my mind was I can't see CN Rail from a promotional viewpoint in terms of what they would say the trip would be like versus your reality of it. And I think the idea and the reality of it brings it to life and to have somebody else live here. So it was a most entertaining presentation. Thank you, Hugh. Normally, we would give a gift to our speaker, $30 gift certificate. Hugh has again refused that. So Dennis, we're okay for a little while here. In terms of that. And thank you very much, Hugh.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.